Okay, I want you to picture this. It's Madison Square Garden, the legendary New York arena. But forget about concerts or sports. Instead, the entire floor is packed with thousands of couples, all wearing the exact same wedding outfits, all getting married in the very same moment. That was the scene back in 1982, with Reverend Myung Moon right at the center of it all. And what went down that day was way more than just a ceremony. It was the launch of a global mission.
So get this, on July 1st, 1982, a jaw-dropping 2,075 couples from over 70 different countries all gathered to be married by Moon. For a lot of them, they'd only met their partners who'd been chosen for them just a few days earlier. Now, to the rest of the world, this looked like a pretty bizarre spectacle. But for Moon and his followers, this was the day that history itself was being rewritten.
The very next day, Moon gave a speech to all these newlyweds, and he laid out this incredible vision that framed their wedding not just as, a personal thing, but as an event of cosmic significance. He was saying it was literally rearranging the heavens. What's so amazing about this speech is that it unpacks an entire worldview, a whole theory of everything.
So, to really get inside this way of thinking, we're going to follow the logic of his speech through 5 core ideas. We'll start with the wedding's unique purpose, then look at the world-ending problem it was supposed to fix, and finally, the ultimate mission these couples were about to be sent on.
All right, first up, let's dig into why Moon believed this event was so much bigger than just a really, really large ceremony. For him, this was the start of a revolution.
The crucial thing to understand here is that this was both a spiritual and a strategic move. Moon was claiming the wedding was healing deep divisions in the spirit world, literally forcing ancestors from old enemy nations to face each other. And that spiritual fix was meant to have a direct impact right here on Earth. It created this global wedding alumni network, which, let's be real, was also a powerful tool for recruitment. It gave them a permanent topic of conversation. It was designed from the ground up to be a new tradition that would just keep growing. But why? Why was such a radical, massive event even necessary? Well, Moon's answer starts with his diagnosis of what is fundamentally wrong with the entire world.
He looked around and saw a world in total moral freefall. From his point of view, society's most sacred institution, the family, was completely disintegrating. And this wasn't just a social problem, it was a spiritual catastrophe that he traced back to a single ancient event.
And this slide perfectly captures his core belief. The problem is original sin. He taught that an act of illicit love back in the Garden of Eden corrupted the human bloodline itself. According to this teaching, every single one of us inherits this spiritual stain, and it's what gives us our natural pull towards being self-centered. He breaks it down like this. First, a misuse of love went against God's law. Second, that act tainted the human bloodline at its very source. And third, that stain gets passed down, generation after generation. So in this worldview, selfishness isn't just a bad choice, it's literally baked into our spiritual DNA.
So, if the main problem is a corrupted family lineage, what's the solution? Well, for Moon, it was actually pretty simple. You have to build a new, purified family line from scratch.
This quote right here gets straight to the heart of his solution. You can't fix this kind of problem from the bottom up. In his view, restoration has to be a top-down process. It needs a spiritual hierarchy, and it all has to start with a new kind of parent.
And here's what that hierarchy looks like. At the very top, you have the true parents. That's Moon and his wife, who he says were ordained by God. Then, by loving them, followers are spiritually reborn as true children, which cleanses them of that original sin. It's only after they've gone through this process that they're considered pure enough to form true marriages, like the ones we saw at Madison Square Garden.
So what does this path to purification actually feel like for an individual follower? Well, Moon described it as a really clear progression, a kind of spiritual evolution with very distinct stages.
It's really interesting. He actually tackles the common accusation that his followers were brainwashed head-on. He quoted a newspaper article that said they seemed heart-washed instead, and he absolutely loved it. He just completely flipped the script, reframing a criticism as a huge compliment. He argued it wasn't about controlling their minds, it was about purifying their hearts.
So, the first stage of this transformation is to become a Moonie. And he defined this as someone who is like the moon, not a source of light itself, but someone who reflects the light given to them by the true parents.
But that mass wedding, that was their graduation ceremony. He actually declared that the couples were no longer Moonies. They had been promoted. They were now Sunnies. And just like the sun, they were now expected to generate their own spiritual light and give it out to the world.
But hold on, becoming a sunny wasn't even the end of the road. The ultimate level, the final stage of this whole evolution, was to become a kingy. A kingy's light is supposedly so powerful that it can penetrate any darkness, break through any barrier, and light up society's biggest problems.
And this brings us to the final piece of his vision. This whole transformation from Moony to Sunny to Kingy, it's not just for personal spiritual growth. It's basically boot camp for a global mission. He framed marriage in this really unique way as a love injection. It was like a spiritual booster shot designed to empower every couple for the really hard work that was waiting for them. They were meant to become, in his own words, super love injectors. And what was that work exactly? Well, he tasked these newly graduated sunnies, who were on their path to becoming kingies, to go right into society's dark alleys and confront evils like prostitution, organized crime, and drug trafficking. I mean, the scale of this mission is just staggering. The ultimate goal wasn't just to make society a little better, it was to completely eliminate original sin from the entire planet, and by doing that, to finally achieve what he called the liberation of God from his grief over a fallen world.
So, to pull this all together, that 1982 mass wedding, at least as Moon explained it, was so much more than a ceremony. It was a critical step in a cosmic plan. It was the solution to a fallen world, a purification process for his followers, and the launchpad for a spiritual army on a mission to save humanity itself.
Ultimately, this vision completely transforms one of the most personal commitments a person can make into a public spiritual duty. And it leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. What happens when marriage is no longer just about two people, but becomes a mission to save the entire world?